Hello, welcome back to another video on astrology. This is the third episode of the series Strange but True. In this series, I am trying to express a very important point that you can't use common sense and logic all the time when it comes to learning astrology or practicing astrology. The reason for that is you have the strange results being attributed to a particular combination by the ancient classical textbooks that somehow does not match with our normal common sense approach. In this episode, I will be talking to you about the differences between the first lord being in the seventh and the seventh lord being in the first. So, to understand this, you need to know everything about the first house and you need to know about the seventh house. The first house is actually everything, you, primarily the body, or you can say the I, prestige and status, name, fame, which is your reference point, and obviously that is the most important house because this is what you are, what you get as soon as you're born, the zodiac that rises in the eastern horizon when you are born. So this is the most important house, and in the human body the first house is the head. The seventh house is the lower abdomen. So what is the seventh house? The seventh house is the meeting house, the meeting place, the business place. You meet your husband, the people who you mostly meet, often meet, the seventh house. The seventh house is also a house of desires, karma. So you expect Maharshi Parasara, the author of Brihat Parasara Horashastra, to speak a lot about the connection between you and the opposite sex, the sexual matters. But it is not all the time only this, because if you listen to him, he says the first lord in the seventh has to be divided into two parts. What if the first house lord is a benefic? What if it is a malefic? If it is a benefic, you get a different result. If it is a malefic, you get a different result. So this is very important to note that sometimes rules are based even on these factors. So let us say if it is if the first lord is a benefic, he says the person will be poor, and he also says the person will be disinterested, virakto, dejected. But of course the word virakto has several meanings, and Girish Chand Sharma translates this as the person will become a Sanyas, an ascetic. And very strangely, I did find many people who had the lord of Lagna in the seventh actually talking only about spiritual practices and not about the opposite sex. And strangely, Maharshi Parasara also says that this combination may lead to the person becoming a king, quite opposite results. But for anything like that to happen, you need an overall extraordinary horoscope for you to become a leader, a big leader, or a politician, or a king. So you maybe it is because the seventh lord is extremely strong and has given rise to a very powerful Raj Yoga. I mean, all this is possible. Only in that case the person can become a king, because there is a world of a difference between poverty, which he says is also possible if the Lagna lord is in the seventh, and then becoming a king. Sometimes it may not be a contradiction, because maybe in the first half of his life maybe he goes through a lot of poverty, and in the later half he becomes a king. That is also possible. And or you find the other way around, like Prince Siddharth or King Ashoka showing disinterest in all this and becoming a saintly person, a spiritual person. This is also possible. But what if the planet is a malefic? So here he says if the lord of the Lagna is in the seventh and that planet happens to be a malefic. Malefics are Mars, Saturn, Sun, Rahu and Ketu. So if it is this, then he uses another kind of logic. He says then the spouse will not live long. But I can also say that wherever there is a threat to the longevity or the lifespan of the spouse, it need not be all the time only this, because in the ancient days there was no practice of divorce in India. The culture of divorce was copied from the Western civilizations, and therefore the only way that the Lagna lord the seventh could affect in those days was through the death of the spouse. But today I found that a lot of divorces happen if the Lord of the first is in the 7th, if it is a malefic. That is also happening. What difference would it make if the 7th Lord is in the first? You expect almost the same kind of results, because the houses involved are the same, and the 7th house is the spouse. So, a lot of things are being discussed about matters of the spouse, karma, as in this case disinterest. But if the 7th Lord is in the first, or the first Lord is in the 7th, the planets are on the same axis, which means they are looking at each other houses. So, the result should be actually the same. So, I will be showing that in the on the whiteboard. If you look at what Maharshi Parasara had to say about the 7th house being in the 7th house Lord being in the first house, he says the person will be extremely sexually oriented and will commit adultery, but also says the person will be very skillful, because I think it requires a lot of skill to do all these things. And he also says devoid of courage and suffer the windy diseases, which is the Vata diseases, as given in the Ayurvedic textbooks. Vata disease means musculoskeletal problem, usually mostly related to the spine or the nerves being crushed between or pinched between joints. So, all this comes under the disease Vata, but actually Vata means around 80 diseases are grouped under the title Vata diseases. So, the 7th Lord in the first is not good for the physical body. Whereas no such mention has been made if the first Lord is in the 7th. The 7th house Lord is in the first house. It is quite different from first Lord being in the 7th. The results are totally opposite, though they are on the same axis. So, that is the reason why I picked up this topic as coming under strange but true. The purpose of doing this is we normally use a lot of common sense when we give a reading, because if astrologers know about the 7th house, they know everything about the 7th, they know everything about the first house. So, they will try to mix and do a permutation combination with this and make around 100 statements based on what they know about the first and 7th. A very interesting thing about the 7th house is the house of travel, because I told you that 7th house is the house of meeting. You meet your spouse, you meet your business people, the customers, your business partner, and it's linked with karma. So, a person having the first Lord in the 7th will have lot many travels. I know people having the first Lord in the 7th have they are on the 5th passport or the 6th passport. They have travelled so much. Take this example. Ascendant is over here in Aries Mesha. The Lord of this is actually Mars. The owner of this house is Mars, and that Mars is in the 7th house. So, if you want to guess why Maharshi Parasara would have said if a malefic occupies the 7th house, there will be pressure in the lifespan, or it reduces the lifespan of the spouse, it is very obvious that malefics in the 7th is not good. It is based on that. And especially if it is Mars, then it comes under a separate within quotes Kuja dosha, Mangal dosha. This is also the same kind, the Lagna Lord in the first Lord in the 7th house, the same thing. Now, suppose you bring in Venus, now you see something quite different, because in this case the person can be very well off, wealthy and very successful, because you have a Venus in the 7th house, and Venus is the Lord of this house, it owns this house, and because Venus sits in the first house, it gives rise to a Pancha Mahapurusha Yoga called Malavya Yoga, and because of this there is some greatness added to Mars. And the problem of Mars is now no more, within quotes Kuja dosha is not there, because Venus is sitting along with Mars. A very important point in astrology is that when you read a book simply like this, first Lord in the 7th, it will not explain what would happen if Venus is here or if Saturn is there. It will not explain all that. So, you need to build up this knowledge and remember as many rules as possible. Now, things are quite different. Now, this horoscope belongs to a person, the last 25 years he has been traveling all over the world. Now, take the other case, the other combination, that Venus, the Lord of the 7th, sits in the first house. Actually, using the theory of aspect, whether Venus is here or Venus is here, they still almost on the same, should give the same effects, because Venus from here will be looking at this house, or for example, if Venus is here, we will be looking at this house. So, it should be the same, but it is not. So, that is the point that I am now discussing in this. So I now request you to type out all your views on this video in the comment section, so that we can go in for some kind of discussion. Like if you can see through what would have been the logic behind why the seventh lord in the first house means that the person will be terribly interested in physical union, whereas the first lord in the seventh, he just hints at the possibility of no interest and not interested in marriage, trying to become an ascetic. What kind of logic Maharshi Parasara would have used. Now, all these arguments apart, you can also take some case studies of your friends or the relatives and horoscopes found on internet, and do your own research and try to understand what is really the difference between the first lord in the seventh and seventh lord in the first house. You can actually verify whether this rule works or not, and by sharing your experience, we only are actually contributing more to the world of astrology. We can help each other by sharing your experience. Thank you so much for watching this video. We have come to the end of this video. In case you have any doubts, please type them out in the comment section, and whenever I find the time, I'll answer them for you. And see you soon in my next video.